I lost my memory and it affected me and my loved ones greatly. After losing my memory, I was faced with the feeling of being completely disconnected from myself. Everything that made up my identity, memories of childhood, friendships, favorite places, significant events, disappeared, leaving me in a state of uncertainty and disorientation. It wasn't just a temporary inconvenience, it became a real ordeal that changed my perception of the world and myself. I woke up in a hospital room, not realizing where I was or who I was. White walls, sterile cleanliness, the quiet hum of medical equipment, all this surrounded me, creating a feeling of unreality of what was happening. My head was buzzing, and every movement felt like a pain in the back of my head. My eyes slowly adjusted to the bright light, and I tried to sit up, but my body refused to obey. It felt like I was looking at the world through a foggy glass that distorted reality. Nurses and doctors came to me, saying something soothing, but their voices seemed distant and inaudible. They called me Sean, but that name didn't resonate inside me. It felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I felt a sense of panic. Who am I? How did I get here? Why don't I remember anything? The doctor explained that there had been an accident and as a result I had suffered a head injury. That's why I lost my memory. He talked about some medical terms, about brain injuries, but it all flew past my consciousness. The only thing that remained in my mind was a terrible thought. My whole life was gone, as if it never existed. How do you lose your memory? It's not just a collection of data that can be deleted. It's history, emotions, experiences, dreams. And it's all gone without a trace. I realized that somewhere out there, beyond this room, there was a whole world full of people, places, events that I had once known. But now it was out of my reach. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My face seemed alien, like a mask that had been put on me against my will. I looked for familiar features, but found nothing. It was a terrifying feeling to feel like a completely new person, devoid of the past. Every morning started the same way. I opened my eyes and looked at the white walls around me. These walls, so clean and smooth, seemed alien to me at first, as if I was in some parallel world where everything was perfect but devoid of soul. The light of the lamp fell on the snow-white sheets, creating a sharp contrast to the darkness outside the window. I lay still, listening to the sounds of the hospital, the monotonous beeping of the instruments, the footsteps of the nurses in the corridor, the muffled conversations outside the door. Gradually, I began to get used to the place. The morning routine became familiar, the faint morning light, the soft creak of the bed springs as I turned around, the smell of disinfection wafting through the air. But despite this, the feeling of alienation was going nowhere. I still couldn't believe this was my new normal. The doctors came in every day, checking my vital signs and asking the same questions about my well-being. Their voices sounded smooth and professional, but there was no warmth in them. They were interested in my condition, but their interest seemed mechanical, like part of a job to be done. It was the same every day: blood pressure, pulse, temperature, questions about pain and mood. My answers were the same: normal, nothing hurts, everything as usual. But inside I felt confused and depressed. They tried to explain to me what amnesia was, talking about how the brain can forget whole chunks of information after a head injury. They talked about the complicated processes of memory recovery, how it takes time and patience. But no matter how much they explained, I still couldn't understand how someone could forget their entire life. It wasn't just the loss of a few files on a computer, it was the loss of a whole world, of all the moments that made me who I was. Their explanations seemed abstract and far from reality. How can one forget the faces of loved ones, favorite places, important events? How can one erase years of study, friendship, love from one's memory? I imagined my memory falling apart into small pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle that cannot be put back together again. And every time the doctor talked about the possibilities of recovery, I felt that hope was melting away, giving way to fear and helplessness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a vacuum, where the past and the future were connected by a thin thread of the present, but that thread was easily severed, leaving me all alone. As time went on, the doctors began to allow me to leave the room for walks in the corridors. One day, a woman came to see me who introduced herself as my sister. Her name was Emily. She came to me with a bouquet of flowers and a smile, but I couldn't remember her. Her voice sounded warm and friendly, but there was no response inside of me. It was strange to realize that a person I had never seen before was talking about our closeness. Emily brought me pictures from the past. They depicted people I supposedly knew, parents, friends, coworkers. But not a single face evoked any emotion in me. The whole thing was like looking through an album of other people's snapshots. The photos looked bright and vibrant, but to me they were empty, like old postcards found in the attic. Not a single face, not a single scene evoked the slightest memory for me. It was a strange feeling to see other people living life to the fullest, laughing, hugging each other, and you standing on the sidelines, watching it all as an outsider. It turned out that our parents were gone and we were the only ones left with each other. This added gravity to my condition. The loss of memory was compounded by the loss of loved ones whom, judging from the photos, I loved and respected. But these feelings were inaccessible to me, as if someone had cut a piece out of my soul. A week later, I was released from the hospital. Emily took me to my parents' house, which was in another city. This house, too, was unfamiliar to me, though my sister assured me that it was my own home, where my childhood had passed. Every room, everything in the house seemed foreign to me. The furniture, the paintings on the walls, the carpets on the floor, it all looked like it was my first time in this place. Even the smells were unfamiliar. The smells of old wood, dust, fresh paint, all mixed into one general scent that didn't conjure up any association with my childhood or home. I didn't believe I could recover quickly. My attempts to remember anything from the past ended in failure. I wandered around the house, touching things, looking at pictures, but nothing came back to me. Things that must have had some meaning to me were now just pieces of furniture or decor. Emily tried to support me, telling me stories from our childhood, showing me places where we played, but it was all to no avail. My mind remained blank, like a white sheet of paper on which no one had written a line. One night when Emily left for work, I decided to look for something in my office. There was an old computer standing there that probably had some data on it about my past life. I turned it on and started digging through the files. Among the many documents and photos, I found one folder called Personal. Inside were letters, diaries, and notes. As I read through some of them, I realized that I used to do something important. Apparently, I had been working on some kind of project related to science or technology. But the details of the project remain mysterious. In one of my emails, I found mention of a man named Alex. He wrote to me about some experiment we were doing together. This letter piqued my interest. Maybe this Alex could help me remember something important. I started looking for information about Alex. It turned out that he worked for the same company as me. I called him and arranged a meeting. When we met, Alex turned out to be a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He greeted me cheerfully, but noticed that I looked confused. I told him about my memory loss. Alex was surprised, but seeing my condition, he didn't ask any questions. He told me about our project. It turns out that we were working on creating a new kind of artificial intelligence. This project was so secret that only a few people knew about it. But the details of the experiment remained a mystery to me. It turned out that I was the main developer, and without me, the project was stuck in place. Those words got me thinking. Maybe getting back to work would help me regain my memory. I decided to give it a try. The next morning I went to the office. My colleagues greeted me with warmth and sympathy. They tried to create as comfortable an atmosphere as possible, understanding how difficult it was for me. Some told me about my achievements, others showed me the projects I was working on. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't remember any of those projects. The memories wouldn't come back, but subconsciously I was trying to do something, even though it was still challenging. Days passed and I still couldn't deal with the feeling of alienation. I went to work, socialized with my colleagues, but it all seemed artificial to me. The work that used to bring pleasure and satisfaction now turned into a mechanical fulfillment of duties. I couldn't concentrate on tasks because I was constantly thinking about who I was and what I had done before. My brain was preoccupied with questions that had no answers. Sometimes I would catch myself looking out the window, watching passersby on the street and thinking, what if I just walked out of here? But then I would come back to reality and realize there was nowhere to run. I had to keep living, keep working, keep finding myself, even if it seemed impossible. One night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I heard a noise downstairs. When I went downstairs, I saw Emily sitting in the kitchen crying. She looked tired and broken, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I stopped in the doorway, hesitant to approach, but then I took a step forward and cautiously sat down next to her. She said she was sad because I had no memory of her and our family. That moment got me thinking. Maybe the problem isn't just that I don't remember my past life, but how it affects the people around me. After all, I'm not the only one who suffers from memory loss. My sister is worried about it too. Her pain was real and I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I decided to change my approach. Instead of trying to remember everything all at once, I began to learn how to live again. I started spending more time with Emily, trying to help her around the house, getting to know her interests. We started spending time together, walking in parks, discussing books and movies, cooking dinner. Our evenings were filled with laughter and conversation, and gradually I began to feel that a connection was being re-established between us. Our walks became longer and longer. We would go outside, breathing fresh air, enjoying nature. Sometimes we would just sit on a park bench, watching people passing by, and talk about the little things that make life beautiful. Gradually, I began to notice that my relationship with Emily was growing closer. We became true friends, and I began to feel like I was a part of her life. Although the memories of the past never returned, I learned to appreciate the present. We built a new foundation for our relationship based on mutual respect and support. A few months passed. I was still working on my project, but now I was doing it with pleasure. My colleagues were supportive, and gradually I began to realize what it meant to be part of a team. One evening, as Emily and I were watching a movie, I suddenly felt something change. I looked at her and suddenly realized that I knew her. It wasn't just knowing the facts, but a deep understanding of the person I had spent so much time with. I remembered how we played as kids, how she protected me from bullies, how we did homework together. Emily cried with joy. We hugged, and in that moment I realized that the memories were coming back. They didn't come all at once, but gradually, step by step, they started coming back to me. The past months helped me realize that life goes on whether you remember your past or not. What matters is the here and now. Although I still had not fully recovered my memory, I felt that I was on the right track.